The holiday season is upon us. Christmas is but days away, and as we barrel towards a brand new year, I'd like to appreciate the year that video games have had. Well, not that. No, not that either. Certainly not that. No, much like Jeff Keighley's Game Awards, I intend to ignore the bad things that are happening in the industry in favour of the good things, the things that I enjoyed, and pretend that everything is fine because that's what Christmas is all about. Jokes aside, in a world of negativity, sometimes you do just need to enjoy the good where you can, and so I'd like to do exactly that. 2024 had a bunch of great new video game releases. From Shadow of the Erdtree to Astrobot, there was something for everyone. I personally like to split my time between new releases, knocking off some games from the old backlog, and returning to some of the classics. And so today's video isn't necessarily just about games that were released in 2024, but an appreciation for how I spent my free time over the last 12 months, and a recognition of some awesome games regardless of what year they came out in. So enough preamble, here are 10 games I enjoyed playing in 2024 in no particular order. First game out the gate is of course Helldivers 2, the co-op PvE game, or PvP if things got out of hand, that took the internet by storm early on in the year. A remarkably simple concept fighting space bugs and robots, and now zombies, in a galactic scale war with a satirical, hyper-nationalist lens over the whole thing. Helldivers essentially takes Starship Troopers, adds a sprinkling of Terminator and COD zombies, and cranks it all up to 11. I don't have the same level of investment as many others, and I am tragically bad at this game, but it doesn't really matter when the entire experience is just so enjoyable. The presentation is superb from the get-go, as you and your squad are quite literally shot from a spaceship in a bullet-shaped drop pod into the planet where war is happening. You take on the role of a disposable, nameless soldier, and as such can and will just die in an infinite number of ways. This promotes a certain level of hijinks and unseriousness to the way that you play out the scenarios, and when playing with friends you can find yourself role-playing very easily. I mean, we've all seen Helldivers 2 clips of people just really getting into character. It's a lot of fun. The movement and controls are at first clunky, but make for a very intentional style of gameplay, and the enemies are each entirely out of the character's league, and yet we always find a way towards victory in the name of democracy. And how could I forget about the explosions in this game, of which there are many. The first time my squad launched an ICBM, watched it fly off into the distance, lighting up the sky as it exploded, and then moments later the shockwave followed. Unforgettable. Just cinema. Everything has such an impact that few other games can match. Helldivers 2 is just a good game, man. I really should put more hours into it sometime. I just wish that it didn't make my PC feel like it's about to burst into flames. Risk of Rain 2 is one of those games I come back to on a pretty much half-yearly basis and sink another few dozen hours into it and enjoy it just as much as I did the first time. And 2024 was no different. In fact, I think I pretty much doubled my playtime because I got it on PS5 and got lost in the sauce of just unlocking everything again and playing couch co-op. It is just such a blast. The ease with which you can just pick it up, jump into an easy mode run and have a chill time, or commit and invest in a multi-loop monsoon run makes for a wildly diverse experience each time, even with the same mechanics running through the whole thing. It blends roguelike elements with fast-paced third-person gameplay so well. There's heaps of build diversity whether you want to go fully random or turn on item selection to optimize the ultimate run. The stages are partially randomized both in their ordering and layout, which keeps them fresh whilst maintaining a level of structure. It's just a really well put together experience. Each character feels unique and has a very different set of movements and abilities. My personal favorite is the bandit, blasting things with the shotgun, sniping other things with the revolver, and then going invisible and backstabbing large enemies. It's just a lot of fun. I'm fully aware that Gearbox went and fucked things up a little bit in the most recent expansion, but I haven't found it to heavily impact my experience really so far. Granted, I've not played much since it was released. I just didn't buy the new expansion, so the content doesn't really ruin anything for me, and I'm truly just vibing when I play this game, so any of the balance issues also didn't really get to me either. I also haven't really run into any bugs personally. That said, my sympathies if it does ruin your experience. I do hope they fix things soon because this is a great game that deserves a lot of love.
Never eat anything bigger than your own head, Keeper.
So Dungeon Keeper, not only is this game not from this year, it's not from this century. Released originally in 1997, this was a game with a lot of sentimental value to me, having spent a lot of time watching my dad play it as a little kid. So when I saw it pop up on Steam for like $8, the memories came flooding back and it was an easy cop. But little did I know that this version was shit. EA attempting to suck money out of the oldies with nostalgia bait, but what it does do is gives you access to the game files to then be used in conjunction with Keeper FX, which is a fan remaster and content project to play this game in all of its glory and then some. Keeper FX gives you a wide range of quality of life improvements, as well as entirely new content that's actually pretty sick. As for what Dungeon Keeper is, it's an RTS where you assume the role of the villain instead of the hero, being the overlord of a dungeon in a fantasy setting. You're placed into these different scenarios with predetermined maps, and you must build up a dungeon, attracting monsters to be your minions while you do. Then you have to keep those monsters fed and happy, destroy other dungeon keepers in the area, and slay the heroes if they dare try and ransack your underground Helltopia. It of course looks old because it is old, but it's got great comedy, fun mechanics, and really shows that a good game is a good game no matter how old it is. So Wayfinder. This is a game that didn't technically release this year, but it effectively released this year. You may or may not recognize it as it was advertised years ago as an MMO. Now that MMO crashed and burned. Just fell flat on its face, as MMOs are known to do, but instead of just shutting down the game servers and cutting their losses, the team went back to the drawing board and just completely overhauled the game into a co-op action RPG. And I think they deserve some praise and recognition for that alone. I've only recently come across it and begun playing it, but so far I've enjoyed it quite a bit. The style of gameplay is this dungeon crawler, third person, character, action, adventure game, I guess. You've got a combination of open-ish world exploration alongside dungeons to break up the gameplay. The enemies are pretty diverse from what I've seen so far, and I think there's also some larger scale boss hunts that unlock a bit later. You've got several different characters to choose from, each with multiple different weapon options, filling broad fantasy archetypes whilst each having their own twists and flavor. The combat is punchy, responsive, and diverse with the use of dodge mechanics, stamina, and skills, and there's also a pretty in-depth house customization mode if you're into that kind of thing. There's tons of equipment and loot, and one of the primary selling points for the entire thing is that it's simply a one-time purchase and it's all yours. No in-game currency, no microtransactions, apart from any expansion content they may make. So as long as that stays the case, then it's cool with me. It also really helps that it's developed and published by Airship Syndicate, the studio headed up by Joe Mad, whose art style I just really love, who was also the creative director behind one of my favorite game series, Darksiders. Alright, so someone's going to tell me that this can't count because this game isn't out yet, but I don't care. This is my list, and this is the concession that I'm making so that half of this list isn't just the half a dozen Monster Hunter titles that I play on repeat. The Monster Hunter Wilds beta was an absolute blast. I loved every second of it, and I am desperate to play the full game come the end of February. The tweaks and updates to some of my favorite weapons feel super nice, the game is gorgeous, the monster design feels fresh while still very familiar. It's just great. The new locales, though we've only had the chance to explore one so far, are seamless open landscapes with lots of nooks and crannies to explore. I enjoy the new characters and the use of the secret, and I'm also just really happy that the developers have listened to the beta feedback, taken it on board, and tweaked things for final launch. It's just shaping up to be an awesome experience, and I'm pretty confident that Wilds is going to be my game of the year for 2025. I would be surprised if anything comes along to outdo it. Pause, quick little call to action. I see you there enjoying this content, but apparently nearly 90% of you all aren't subscribed. Hit those subscribe and bell buttons for new videos on the regular. You know you want to. Alright, back to it. Okay, so Dragon's Dogma 2 was one of the biggest releases for me this year, and I must say I have some complex feelings about it. Feelings that I'm not even quite sure I know how to articulate properly. I thoroughly enjoyed the first one. It felt like the closest thing at the time to playing out an action-adventure style D&D campaign, almost like a mix of D&D, Monster Hunter, and Dark Souls, while still being entirely unique. It didn't have the greatest story, but it was fresh, had great combat, and was an all-around awesome RPG. So the announcement of a sequel had me pretty excited, and diving into it, it was like a blast from the past. I enjoyed the new map, the new features, the new combat elements, fighting goblins and saurians, climbing up cyclops, and riding griffins off into the distance. I love the random occurrences like a monster wandering into a town, or a griffin grabbing cattle and flying off to its nest. It's nice, it makes the world feel lived in. The presentation is pretty nice as well, though the start of the first game is far more impactful. It's all in all a really solid, meaty RPG with a lot going on, though it wasn't without its faults by any means. There's very few new monsters. In fact, there's not much monster variety at all, especially when walking across the map with the limited fast travel. Halfway through the game, you open up an entire second half of the map known as Batal, which is a desert zone that I expected to really freshen everything up with, but it just kinda didn't. It was still more of the same, and also just this insane difficulty spike, and the major story beats just kind of flip a coin and they're either really cool or fall completely flat, and the whole thing doesn't feel grand enough considering your character is supposed to be this world-saving messiah of sorts. I also don't like the sporadic unlocking of weapon classes very much, but there are these moments of gold. The Sphinx encounters, the griffin riding, the Colossus chase, pretty much anything with the large monsters is great and absolutely steals the show. The post-game is great as well. It's got these really great moments in a game that's a little unsure what it wants to be otherwise. Ultimately, it's not an evolution on Dragon's Dogma 1, it's not realizing the full potential of what can be, not escalating anything, it's just more of the same. And at the end of the day, I unfortunately don't have the same amount of free time to get hyper invested in a complex RPG like I used to. Perhaps if I did, I would appreciate it all the more. That said, still enjoyed it, it's still on today's list.
Company command! This is first platoon! We've lost the square! We can't hold it!
Like many of you, I spent my childhood spending my parents' money on important things like video games and Warhammer miniatures. So you would imagine it's a pretty special occasion when a video game comes out that is about Warhammer. Well, to that I would say it would be, if there weren't 50 million of them already. A bit of hyperbole, yeah, but seriously, there's like 50 games on Steam under the Warhammer tag. So yeah, it's not a momentous affair when a new one drops, and on average, they kinda suck, but every now and then a gem drops, and this year, that gem was Space Marine 2. Now, this game sets itself apart from the rest of them because it's a large-scale, AAA quality game set in that universe, whereas a lot of the others are just not high quality at all. Space Marine 2 was a big deal because it was the sequel to Space Marine 1. Who wrote this script? Did I write this script? The first game was a quintessential late 2000s, early 2010s video game. It was a hack and slasher where you took on the role of big manly Captain Titus, an ultramarine tasked with purging an orc invasion from a planet, just to find out that those filthy chaos guys were behind the entire thing. It was great, simple, and a lot of fun. And the new one is a direct follow-up to that. Sort of. It takes place like 100 years afterwards, and replaces orcs with Tyranids. For those not familiar with Warhammer, much like Helldivers, it is a riff on human imperialism expanding into the stars and being met with insane resistance. Though where Helldivers offers comedy, Warhammer takes itself very, very seriously, to the point where it sort of loops around back to satire in and of itself. This game is gorgeous with its vistas and sheer number of enemies at a time on screen. It does an excellent job of making you feel like an angel of death as you cleave through hundreds of Tyranids, beheading warriors and beheading zoanthropes and beheading lictors. Just a lot of beheading, really. It's very simple in its mechanics, with your primary inputs being shoot, move, and melee attack, and everything has a good sense of weight behind it. The story is pretty short by today's standards, coming in at about 9 or 10 hours, and frankly, I found that pretty refreshing. In a world of God of Wars and Last of Us's, it was nice to be able to knock over the campaign in a couple of sittings rather than a couple of weeks, and incentivized me to replay it on harder difficulties. The game is not flawless, far from it. The story is nothing revolutionary. The multiplayer is fine, has some good replay value, but does get a bit repetitive, and the Chaos Marines are downright unfun to fight when you compare them to the Tyranids. But my enjoyment of Warhammer sees past all of that, and I enjoyed my time with Space Marine 2 a lot. Dredge is a game that was on my backlog since it came out, and after jumping into it and its expansions this year, completing everything there was to complete, I must say that it was quite the treat. On the surface, this game appears to be a cozy fishing game, and at times it is, but beneath that surface lurks a colossal eldritch horror waiting for its chance to pull you under. Dredge is a game where you assume the role of a fisherman, taking up work in a small remote fishing town to escape his inner demons and sorrows. Interactions with the people in town are a point-and-click affair, jumping between different vendors, characters, and quest givers, and then you set sail to catch your day's worth of fish, filling out your little fish Pokedex as you go, which, as someone who loves that kind of shit, I really enjoyed doing. Controlling the boat is easy and smooth. Fishing is done through various mini-games depending on the style of fish. You need to upgrade your boat so that you can venture further within the day and explore the map better, and swap out rods and nets to suit yourself to the different depths and climates. It's a neat little management game that's very easy to relax to. And then you haul up a fish that is a little bit twisted and grotesque. And then another. And another. The people you come across become more manic and paranoid. Gigantic shadows move beneath you in the open water, and then nighttime rolls around. The first time you overstay your welcome on the waves and the sun sets before you make it back home is terrifying. Shadowy ships float across the horizon. Blaring horns are heard in the distance, ghostly apparitions appear before you, and your light flickers and goes out. It is pretty nerve-wracking and just so thematic and immersive. Now, admittedly, as you go on and your equipment becomes better and better, the terror of the situation does dissipate because you become much faster and have the tools to deal with all the monsters you find, but I still really enjoy it from start to finish. The DLC expansions are not a must by any means. They are a little bit like additional fetch quests and checklists that suffer from the same feeling of being a little bit too easy given your stats when you get to them, but they do add some extra content, so if you enjoy the base gameplay, they're worth having a look at. Dredge is great, I definitely recommend.
That tarnished, it seemeth. Mother, wouldst thou truly lordship sanction in one so bereft of right? Yet, my purpose standeth unchanged.
Okay, I'll keep this one short and sweet because I feel like everything that could be said about Shadow of the Erdtree has been said about Shadow of the Erdtree. An excellent expansion for an excellent game. This gave us even more of the impressive and immersive world that Elden Ring already offered, gave us a slew of new awesome boss fights with the odd misstep, looking at you, Commander Gaius and Leda. And just all in all, it was a blast to get lost in that world once again. It's an expansion the size of a standalone game, and you can go and complain that it was too difficult or badly scaled and be completely valid in that opinion, but for me, the expansion hit just right. And the final boss reveal and finally managing to take it down after hours of trying was one of the greatest gaming feelings of the year.
Rock the dragon, dragon ball, sing. Dragon, dragon, rock the dragon, come get me.
the last game on today's list is a guilty pleasure game, I'd say, one that's just fun even if it is definitely not taking home any Game of the Year awards. It's Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. Whilst I'm far from the most fanatical Dragon Ball fan, that would be a mate of mine, I do really enjoy it for what it is. Power fantasy, manly nonsense, fighting aliens and universe-ending abominations through the power of friendship and punching things really, really hard. Sparking Zero allows you to do all of that, building on the Budokai Tenkaichi games, giving you a massive roster of characters, half of which are Goku, so you can live out any Dragon Ball fantasy you can think of. It's fast-paced, woefully unbalanced, and just brain-off fighting game fun. I've got no idea which characters are and aren't good. I just like playing Beerus, and they need to hurry up and give me Orange Piccolo, because Orange Piccolo is the best Piccolo. And those were 10 games I enjoyed playing in 2024. A nice mix of new, old, and super old that made for a great year in gaming for the players. But with that said, and I know I joked about it in the intro, this was not a great year for the developers, the artists that make these excellent games we enjoy so much. Layoffs, cancellations, and the rise of things like AI art are making for a pretty miserable experience for those that put their hearts and souls into these things that we love. And we can only hope that the bubble soon bursts and the industry recognizes that the whole point is just to make good-ass games. A very Merry Christmas to you all, or whatever you may or may not celebrate over the coming weeks. I won't make any promises about videos between Christmas and New Year's because I myself will be spending time with family and friends, but I do have a couple of quick and easy things cooking to keep you guys sated before we get stuck back in next year. Stay tuned for great things to come, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!